What if I told you one of rock's most famous Christian anthems was written by an Orthodox Jew who chose Jesus because he was more marketable than Jehovah? Norman Greenbaum crafted his masterpiece in 15 minutes, then vanished to become a dairy farmer. The recording was pure chaos, a Jewish rocker singing about salvation backed by Kentucky gospel singers, using a custom fuzz guitar wired into the instrument itself. This is the twisted journey of Spirit in the Sky.
Mama's in the kitchen cooking up a storm cook.
Our story begins not in the psychedelic studios of San Francisco or the folk clubs of Greenwich Village, but in the Orthodox Jewish community of Malden, Massachusetts. Norman Joel Greenbaum was born there on November 20th, 1942, into a world of ritual and tradition that would seem completely at odds with his future as a fuzz guitar-wielding rock star. But young Norman was what he called a radiohead, a kid who lived with his ear pressed to the speaker, absorbing everything from Southern blues to the emerging folk sounds of the late 50s and early 60s. Picture a teenage Norman in his Orthodox household, secretly tuning in late at night to catch the sounds that were reshaping American music. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. After high school, he landed at Boston University, but the real education was happening in the coffee houses around town. This was the epicenter of the folk revival, and Norman found himself watching legends in the making. Joan Baez, a young Bob Dylan, Taj Mahal. But while his contemporaries were drawn to the earnest protest songs and political folk anthems, Norman was marching to a different drummer, literally. What captured his imagination wasn't the serious folk of the protest movement, but something much more whimsical and theatrical, the vaudevillian jug band music of the 1920s and 30s. It was an unusual choice for a young man in the early 60s, but it revealed something crucial about Norman's artistic DNA. He was always going to be different. In 1965, Norman made the classic move of his generation. He dropped out of college and headed to Los Angeles. But instead of joining the Laurel Canyon folk rock scene or the Sunset Strip bands, he formed something completely unique, Dr. West's Medicine Show and Junk Band. This wasn't your typical rock band. Picture this, a psychedelic outfit where one drummer literally played car parts and trash cans, mixing comedy with bizarre found instruments in a sound that was part medicine show, part avant-garde experiment. Norman had taken his love of vintage vaudeville and run it through the prism of the emerging psychedelic scene. The band's claim to fame was a novelty single that perfectly captured the absurdist spirit. The eggplant that ate Chicago. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a joke. But here's the thing. It reached number 52 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1967. Norman Greenbaum had found his first taste of national success with a song about a vegetable monster. But more importantly, the eggplant that ate Chicago revealed Norman's superpower, his ability to craft an infectious, memorable hook wrapped around the most unlikely subject matter. It was a skill that would soon change his life completely. By 1968, Dr. West's Medicine Show had run its course, and Norman found himself signing with Reprise Records as a solo artist. Initially, he was back to his folk roots, but everything was about to change thanks to two of the most unlikely muses in rock history, old Western movies and Porter Wagoner. Norman was a devotee of classic Westerns, and there was one archetype that particularly fascinated him, one he called the mean and nasty varmint. You know the type, the outlaw who, when faced with his final moments, declares he wants to die with his boots on. To Norman, this wasn't just bravado, it was a powerful statement about facing the great unknown on your own terms. At the same time, he was regularly watching Porter Wagoner's country music television show. Wagner was a fixture on the Grand Ole Opry scene, known for his rhinestone suits and traditional country sound. One evening, Norman heard Wagner sing a gospel number called Pastor's Absent on Vacation.
Paused for a moment and wiped the sweat from his thin, wrinkled face.
The melody stuck with him, but more than that, he was struck by the power of gospel music's simple, direct approach to spiritual themes. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most mundane source imaginable, a greeting card. Norman had never revealed exactly what was on that card, but something about its phrasing sparked the final creative connection. With these three desperate elements swirling in his head, the defiant cowboy, the gospel melody, and that mysterious greeting card phrase, Norman sat down and wrote the lyrics to Spirit in the Sky in just 15 minutes. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Norman Greenbaum, raised in Orthodox Jewish tradition, made a conscious decision to center his song around Jesus, and he was surprisingly candid about why. Jesus was a more marketable figure than Jehovah. It was a calculated commercial choice, but one that would prove prophetic. Yet Norman always insisted that the song wasn't really about Christian doctrine. As he put it, it wasn't like a Christian song of praise, it was just a simple song. More importantly, it wasn't the Jesus part, it was the Spirit in the Sky. This distinction between religious dogma and universal spiritual longing is crucial to understanding why the song would resonate far beyond Christian audiences. Norman's initial demo was a simple folk arrangement, just him and his acoustic guitar. It was pleasant enough, but it wasn't revolutionary. Enter producer Eric Jacobson, best known for his work with The Lovin' Spoonful, who heard something much bigger in Norman's 15-minute composition. Jacobson took one listen and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to transform this folk song into a rock anthem, but not just any rock anthem, something that would blend the raw power of hard rock with the spiritual lift of gospel music. The recording took place at Coast Recorders in San Francisco, and Jacobson assembled a dream team of session musicians: Russell Dashiell on lead guitar, Doug Kilmer from the band Crowfoot on bass, and Norman Mayall from Sopwith Camel on drums. These weren't just hired hands, they were key players in the Bay Area's psychedelic rock scene. But the most crucial element was Norman's guitar sound. He was playing a Fender Telecaster, but this wasn't any ordinary Telecaster. Norman had a custom-built fuzz device wired directly into the guitar's body, not an external pedal, but an integrated part of the instrument itself. When he hit those opening chords, the sound was unlike anything else on the radio. Raw, gritty, and unmistakably powerful. While Norman played all the core guitar parts, Russell Dashiell added what one observer called the searing solos, and echo-enhanced boinks and dive bombs that gave the track its psychedelic edge. But the real magic happened when Jacobson brought in the Stovall Sisters, a guitar-based gospel trio. Picture this moment in the studio. You've got Norman, the Orthodox Jew from Massachusetts, wailing about having a friend in Jesus over a fuzzed-out rock arrangement, while three African-American gospel singers from Kentucky provide stratospheric harmonies and hand-clapping percussion. It was a collision of cultures, regions, and musical traditions that shouldn't have worked, but created something transcendent. The final result was what one critic called oddly good and compelling, a blend of boogie rock, blues, gospel, and hard rock that defied easy categorization. It was Norman's vision, Jacobson's arrangement, and the perfect storm of talented musicians all serving the song. When Spirit in the Sky was released in December 1969, it didn't just become a hit, it became a phenomenon. The single was certified gold, selling over 2 million copies. It spent 15 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 3. But this was just the beginning. The song hit number 1 in the UK, Australia, and Canada in 1970. The timing couldn't have been better. By 1970, the psychedelic era was waning, and music was moving away from drug references toward more spiritual and religious themes. Spirit in the Sky stood at the perfect intersection. It had the sonic power of psychedelic rock, but the spiritual seeking that was becoming the new zeitgeist. But success brought its own challenges. The song's intricate studio sound, with its double-tracked vocals, gospel chorus, and that custom fuzz guitar, was nearly impossible to replicate in a live performance. Norman found himself in the strange position of having created a masterpiece that he could barely perform. Television appearances like Dick Clark's American Bandstand often required him to lip-sync to the record, a common but somewhat deflating practice for live performers. The song that made him famous had become almost too complex for its own creator to reproduce. Following up Spirit in the Sky proved to be an impossible task. Norman released subsequent albums, Back Home Again in 1970 and the all-acoustic Petaluma in 1972, but neither charted. He had another minor hit with Canned Ham, which reached number 46 in 1970, but it was nowhere near the cultural impact of his signature song. Norman was philosophical but honest about his situation. "I fell into the one-hit wonder hole. A lot of booking people got wary." It's a familiar story in rock history. An artist creates something so perfect, so lightning in a bottle magical, that everything afterward seems like an anticlimax. By 1972, Norman made a decision that says everything about his character. He largely retired from the music business and bought a dairy farm in California. Picture this transformation from psychedelic rock star performing on national television to dairy farmer dealing with cows and crops. It's almost poetic in its contrast. But Norman wasn't bitter. He had had his moment, created something lasting, and chose to live life on his own terms. In the mid-'80s, he returned to the music world, but in a managerial capacity, promoting concerts rather than performing in them.
So good to sound back home again.
While Norman retreated from the spotlight, his song refused to fade away. Spirit in the Sky began what can only be described as a second, third, and fourth life through its constant use in popular culture. The song became the go-to soundtrack for moments that required both spiritual uplift and rebellious edge. It appeared in Apollo 13 during the tense moments of the space mission. It powered the climactic scene in Remember the Titans. It added gravitas to Ocean's 11 and brought cosmic humor to Guardians of the Galaxy. Each placement introduced the song to new generations, creating a snowball effect of cultural relevance. Kids who weren't even born when Norman recorded the song were hearing it in movie theaters and falling in love with that unmistakable fuzz guitar opening. But the song's legacy got an even bigger boost from cover versions. In 1986, the British glam rock band Doctor and the Medics released their version, which actually hit number 1 in the UK, 36 years after the original. Later, Gareth Gates' 2003 version also achieved chart success. These covers, combined with constant licensing for films and commercials, created a steady stream of royalties that meant Norman never needed to work again. His 15-minute burst of inspiration in the late 60s had become a lifetime annuity. Which brings us back to a Colorado mountaintop in 2005 and Hunter S. Thompson's explosive farewell. The choice of Spirit in the Sky for this ultimate counterculture moment wasn't random. It was perfect. Thompson, like the mean and nasty varmints in Norman's beloved Western movies, had lived his entire life on his own terms and was determined to die the same way. The song's message about a personal journey to the Spirit in the Sky transcended its Christian imagery to become something universal, an anthem for anyone facing the great unknown with defiance rather than fear. The funeral, funded by Johnny Depp as a tribute to his friend, became the ultimate validation of the song's enduring power. Here was a piece of music that could simultaneously speak to Christian believers, Jewish artists, psychedelic rockers, and Gonzo journalists. It was, in Norman's own words, about the spirit in the sky, not any particular religious doctrine, but the human spirit itself.
Burning midnight oil, burning.
There's one more chapter to Norman's story that brings everything full circle. In 2015, at age 72, Norman was seriously injured as a passenger in a car accident that killed a motorcyclist. He spent 3 weeks in a coma, hovering between life and death. His own journey to potentially meet the spirit in the sky. But Norman survived, recovered, and returned to performing. It's a remarkable parallel to his most famous creation, a song about facing the final journey that was created by a man who would later face that journey himself and return to tell the tale.
Jethro got himself a milk cow.
Norman Greenbaum's legacy rests on 15 minutes of inspiration, 5 hours of studio magic, and 50 years of cultural staying power. His journey from Orthodox Jewish childhood to psychedelic rock stardom to dairy farming to near-death experience and back to performance is as unlikely and compelling as the song itself. Spirit in the Sky succeeds because it's both specific and universal, both deeply spiritual and thoroughly secular, both a product of its time and completely timeless. It's a Christian song written by a Jew, a spiritual anthem beloved by rebels, a simple folk tune transformed into a psychedelic masterpiece. In the end, Norman Greenbaum created something that transcends easy categorization. Much like the man himself, it's a song about dying with your boots on, performed by someone who's shown remarkable spirit through his own unexpected journey. And somewhere in California, Norman Greenbaum, now in his 80s, knows that when his time comes to meet the spirit in the sky, he'll be remembered for creating one of the most enduring anthems in rock history. Not bad for a nice Jewish boy from Massachusetts who just wanted to write about mean and nasty varmints. What part of Norman's story gripped you the most? Did you find out something you didn't know about the song? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more music deep dives.